And we're live. Welcome, everybody, here to the Lakers Lowdown Podcast. I'm Anthony Irwin, Lakers insider for Lakers Daily. And today on the show, we're going to be talking about Rui. We're going to be talking about the season that he had, the expectations going into it, and then also use that to figure out his expectations going into this season and figure out the likelihood that he meets those expectations in ways that he didn't last year. Before we get to any of that, by the way, we have one of my favorite stories of the summer. In that, like, it's just a joy to kind of chuckle at. We're going to be talking a little bit about LeBron James not wanting to be called dad on a basketball court. I find all of it delightful. So let's go ahead and get into that. I'm not gonna lie. Every so often a story comes along and I think to myself, like, this is perfect for me and Harrison. And normally Harrison and I would have been recording tonight. He has some stuff that he's taking care of. So it will be another week before you hear from Harrison and me. So in the meantime, we're going to keep on doing these season previews, and we'll get to the Rui one here in a bit. But I'm going to play a clip of uninterrupted, I think, or whatever. Whatever. I think it's from The Shop. That's what it is. Where LeBron was asked about what it's going to be like to be on the court with Bronny, and specifically about how Bronny is to refer to LeBron. Again, this is from The Shop.
Have you thought through, not relationship, because you always be his dad, he'll always be his son, but what's your working relationship? Is he going to call you dad at practice in the locker room?
No, we already laid that. No, he can't. We already laid that down. He cannot call me dad in the workplace. All right. Once we leave out of the private facility and the gates close, I could be dad again. Okay. In the car, if we ride together. Okay. At home, I could be dad. No, he got to call me like 2-3 or Bron. Okay. Or, GOAT if he wants to. That's up to him. I mean, it's up to him. But it's easy for me. It's easy for me because I've been calling him Bronny for so long. Yeah. It's not like I've been calling, hey son. So it's easy for me. It's gonna be the adjustment for him. But we cannot be running down the court. And he'd be like, Dad, push the ball up, Dad, I'm open, Dad, come on. I'm like, no, you cannot do that.
That's the good stuff. That's good. So again, LeBron is saying that he needs Bronny, who has probably called him LeBron or called him dad for the entirety of his life. Hey, go ahead, please reprogram your brain and refer to me in the correct way on the basketball court. And hey, look, once we're away from the court, you're good. You can call me whatever you want, specifically dad. I played basketball with my dad. I don't think he thought about this at all. But when we played pickup or whatever, when I was growing up, I called him dad. And I do kind of think, though, from LeBron's perspective, it would give Bronny a bit of an advantage, right, on the court, where everybody else who calls for the ball is like, Bron, hey, 2-3, what, Bron, LeBron, whatever, GOAT, if you really want the ball. And I do think that if Bronny really wants the ball and he screams out, Dad, like he's probably getting the ball above anybody who calls LeBron anything other than GOAT. So I see where LeBron is coming from. But it just sent off an entire can of worms in my head, which is what my brain is made up of mostly, right? It's a can of worms that every so often opens up, and it's like repack it and all that stuff. But I was thinking, like, the place that my head immediately went was to one of my favorite movies of all time, which has an absolutely classic scene that looks a little different if LeBron is a key character in that movie. Let's see how many of you remember this.
Hey, Dad? You want to have a catch?
What the fuck?
I'm sorry. It's just too good. It's like Bronny's in the locker room. And Bronny just like forgets where he's at for a second. Hey, Dad.
What the fuck?
And then, talking about potential advantages, a potential disadvantage for the Lakers this year is in moments where Bronny is on the court and, a particularly smart guy from the other team just starts yelling, Dad. Like if I played against the Lakers and Bronny and LeBron were on the court at the same time, I would see what I could get away with here. Dad, woo, Dad, woo. And then if he gives me the ball, like I just got to steal off of LeBron James. Like that's just smart basketball, right? That's a high IQ play. I can guarantee you, Jose Alvarado from the New Orleans Pelicans is probably like working on Bronny's voice, seeing if he could get that down so he could say Dad in the exact right kind of tone to make sure he gets the pass from LeBron and then, gets one of his Grand Theft Alvarado steals that way. It's just, look, I love all of this. I love, it's now that we're far enough away from the nepotism and all of those conversations that I found, pretty tedious. Now that we're far enough away from it, we can just laugh about it. And that's when stories, become more fun for me, is when we can just kind of sit back and laugh at how ridiculous it is that LeBron is playing with his son. Ridiculous in a good sense there. And also ridiculous in a funny sense that he's thought and he has spoken to Bronny about the fact that Bronny is to specifically only refer to him in this one way or not refer to him in this one way. It's just all of it's great. All of it's funny. And I can't wait to see how it plays out on the court. If Bronny is, good enough to get out onto the court. All right, let's talk about Rui. And we'll talk, as I prefer to do, we're going to talk about the season that Rui had within the context of what the expectations were for him. Remember, before the season, Rui, I believe, so let's see, Lakers re-sign Rui Hachimura. Yeah, it was in 2023. So heading into last season, they signed Rui to a not like necessarily small contract, right? They signed him to this deal, and the thinking is after signing him to that deal, he would definitely be a cog in the starting lineup that at least gets like the first bite at the apple to see what everything looks like with him there. Again, going into last season, throughout the organization, the thought was the advantage that the Lakers were going to lean on heavily was going to be their continuity last season compared to the one before. And, made a lot of sense. Media Day was all about continuity. Media Day was, a bunch of guys coming off of a trip to the Western Conference Finals, looking ahead to a training camp and 82 games to iron out whatever wrinkles that they have to be able to hopefully improve on the somewhat, actually surprising run that they went on in the second half of the season. And everybody from Rob Pelinka to LeBron to Anthony Davis to D'Lo, Austin, Rui, the assistant coaches, hell, you watch Spectrum Sportsnet that day, and that was clearly something that, in the production meetings that, they kind of went over what questions to ask and which topics to lean on. And even they were on the same page with the Lakers as far as the major competitive advantage in this modern NBA that could be continuity. The only person who missed all of the memos was Darvin Ham. And as such, he was the worst person to miss all of those memos because he's the guy who was deciding who played when. And remember how long it took to just like how long we begged for the Lakers to like even try their best lineups from the year previous, like that prior year when they went again, surprisingly, all the way to the Western Conference Finals. And so anyway, like I say all of that to offer context on this, on like how weird Rui's season was. And one of the things that I pulled up in preparation for this for the show was Rui's game log, where you could really see how ridiculous his minutes were night by night. First game of the season, 14 minutes 39 seconds. Second game of the season, 12 minutes 29 seconds. Third game of the season, 17 minutes 16 seconds. I believe he got hurt in that one, and he wound up missing the next 4 games. And he comes back and immediately plays 25 minutes and then 20 minutes and a half, then 32 minutes, almost basically 33 minutes. And then it's 23 minutes, basically 24. And then it drops down to 17, almost 18 minutes. Nope, right back up to 27, and then 32, and then 28, and then 26. And then I think he got hurt again. He got dinged up. And then he comes back and it's 21, and it's 21, and it's 28, and it's 24, and it's 34, and then it's 17, and then it's 16, and then it's 33, and it's 29, and it's just, you guys get the sense. And then finally later in the season, Darvin realized, oh fuck, that's right, Rui's like our 4th most talented player, 5th most talented player on the roster. He's at least top 5 most talented player on the roster. and then finally, you get to the end of the season and those numbers kind of consistently settle, in that 35. So it goes 35, 36, 21. I think he 21. And then 32, 38, 23, 35, 29, 25, 24, 30, 38. And even there, like even when he, kind of figured it out, you saw some kind of jumping around there. And this, I say all of this not to excuse some of the bad habits that we saw from Rui, but at least to explain them, right? Like this guy, I think he's a very, very talented player. We saw it again in the Olympics this year, where he was like almost single-handedly helping Japan beat France almost. And then France got some home cooking. He got ejected, and then the home cooking carried out for the rest of that game there. But Rui was giving everybody everything that they could handle in that game because he's that talented a player. I do truly think that Rui is worthy of the lottery position that he was taken in, right? So he I would say, if I had to like sum up the season that he had last year, I would say he underwhelmed, but in a way that was completely beyond his control. I actually probably think it shares a lot in common with Austin Reeves' season, where I think Austin Reeves underwhelmed. But a lot of that had to do with the fact that Darvin Ham didn't seem to like him on a borderline personal level. And Darvin was leaning on Taurean Prince a lot more throughout the season than Rui. That didn't make a ton of sense. It also, I don't think, helped that Jared Vanderbilt was hurt for most of the year. Rui and Vando kind of offer that two sides of the same coin dynamic, and I think both are better when they are both in the rotation. And so, yeah, I really, think that the season that Rui had was in some ways disappointing, even in a vacuum, or even within that context. Like Rui's defense last year, and still to this day, leaves a lot to be desired. Rui a lot of his defensive focus and give a bleep has a lot to do with whether or not he's scoring the basketball. He's reaching a point in his career where that can't continue if he wants to be a winning player. And so that'll be something that we watch for, and we'll talk about here later in the show. So that Rui season underwhelmed, mostly I think because of Darvin Ham, but also that doesn't let him completely off of the schneid or whatever, because he also just like flat out needed to be better. And where it really gets weird was the postseason performance, where he's coming off of finally being used in the way that he should have been, and he was a playoff performer the year prior, and then really struggled in last year's one series that the Lakers played in. So the playoffs were ugly for Rui. He, in the 5 games that the Lakers played against Denver, he played 31 minutes in the first one, but was a -11. Played 37 minutes in the second one, was a -2. In a game that the Lakers, I think I narrowly lost, and then his minutes dipped down to 27, and then they dipped down to 21 in the game that the Lakers actually won. And then they jumped back up to 34 in the game that the Lakers lost, that eventually, ended their season. In those games, he attempted 2, 4, 6, 9, 14 3-pointers for the series in that playoffs. Knocking down, what did he make? 1, 2, 3, 4 of 14 from 3-point range in the postseason. In that series, that's not great, neither on volume nor on efficiency. From the field, okay, like he was, but like again, 4 field goal attempts, 7 field goal attempts, 4 field goal attempts, 8 field goal attempts, and then finally 15 field goal attempts. He was just not really a factor. He was being asked at the very onset of the series to guard Jokic, and I think that took away some of his legs. Again, not excusing, but trying to explain the lack of postseason production. But you compare those numbers to what he did over the course of the regular season, and on the year, 54% from the field, 42% from 3-point range, 74% from the free throw line, and on like decent value, right? So I would like to see his 3-point attempts go up this year. He basically shot 1.5 for every, or made 1.5 for every 3.5 attempts that he took, per game. And then, from the field, he only shot under like 10 attempts per game. If this guy is going to be like a key part of your offense, you need more actual production. And it was like especially annoying that he was hitting at those numbers and still couldn't quite get the volume up. And a lot of that, again, going back to what we talked about in the last segment, had to do with Darvin Ham just, sucking at his job. So, you look at the numbers overall for Rui: 13.6 points per game, half a block, just over half a steal, just over an assist, and only 4 rebounds a game. Like, it's underwhelming, but in ways that I think that the Lakers can very easily get more from him this year. And look, like, we're going to talk a little bit about the offseason before we get to the season that could be. Um, but seeing as the Lakers, um, see him as one of their cornerstone pieces. Remember, he was one of the few guys that JJ Redick shouted out. Now, he answered a question specifically about, or asked specifically about Rui. So that needs to be taken into account. But again, he mentioned LeBron, he mentioned AD, he mentioned Austin, and then he mentioned Rui, or then he was asked about and spoke, at decent length about Rui. Didn't talk about D'Lo, didn't talk about Vando. At that time, we thought that there was going to be a lot more, turnover with the Lakers roster, and it didn't wind up playing out that way. And part of the reason that it didn't play out that way is how negotiations went between the Lakers and Portland Trailblazers as it pertains to Rui Hachimura. Just really quickly, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but Rui was one of those names. So the name that the Lakers were asked most about was Austin, right? Teams know that they probably aren't going to get LeBron. Teams know that they aren't going to get Anthony Davis. But anytime the Lakers wanted anything of any kind of value from a different team, the negotiations basically started at, well, we want Austin. And then when the Lakers said, well, you're not getting Austin, other teams said, cool, well, it's going to cost you an extra pick. And then the next player that they would ask about would be Rui after Austin. Remember the Lakers were about to re-sign and eventually did re-sign Max Christie. So it took him off of the negotiating table relatively quickly. They found, they basically found money in Dalton Connect, and we're not particularly interested, I'm told, in moving him either. So, that it basically turned out that in terms of basketball players that the Lakers could move or had any interest whatsoever in moving, Rui was the most kind of sought after player asset that the Lakers had at their disposal. You could say D'Angelo Russell's expiring contract, but that was more about his expiring contract than about D'Angelo Russell, the player. You could maybe say Jared Vanderbilt, but he's coming off of a season where we basically didn't see him. So teams weren't exactly. And then, what we did see of Vando, we'll do his season re-preview, but it wasn't overwhelming. So it really kind of became, all right. It was, and with Portland specifically, they basically said, no, not interested in Gabe. Nah, not really interested in D'Lo. Rui, 2 picks, whatever other contracts that we need to do there. But the starting point there is Rui and 2 picks for Jeremy Grant. And the Lakers were like, cool. No. And that's where things basically stand now. And same kind of goes for Washington, where Washington was like, can we get Austin? The Lakers called about Kuz. Washington would basically reply, can we get Austin? Lakers go, no. Can we get 2 picks? No. All right. How about 1 pick and some seconds? All right. Maybe now we're talking. Rui? That's weird. Maybe. Okay. Maybe. And again there, those talks kind of stalled out relatively quickly because, there was just, it's difficult to basically trade a young wing who you have seen perform in the postseason. Even if they didn't perform, or Rui didn't perform up to expectations in last year's postseason, you still look back and you're like, man, that series against Memphis was insane. He was one of the few players that we saw actually show up against Denver. His production helped turn things around against Golden State. It was just, you watch that, and then you watch a season where he was basically suffocated by the head coach, and then didn't have a rhythm really going into the postseason, and the postseason went poorly. All of that, you try to do math on all of that, and you try to figure out his value in some kind of trade negotiation, and that's part of why the Lakers had real difficulty coming to terms with having to potentially move him. So I say all of that to basically set the table or help set the table for, look, if you were reluctant to move Rui, just like they were adamantly against moving Austin Reeves, well, now Rui better put up, because the players that you were having those negotiations for probably would have helped next year. All right, so expectations for Rui. What are fair, what are realistic? I think it all starts on the defensive side of the ball. We know this dude is a bucket. We know that, he's going to be a willing scorer. We know that his eyes light up and his world just completely shifts on its axis when he is playing good basketball on the offensive side of the ball. We also, however, know that when he isn't playing very well offensively, everything else shifts. And so for me this year, if Rui wants to be the player that the Lakers are paying him to be, and he's not exactly cheap, if Rui is going to be that player, he needs to be a night in, night out, no matter what I'm doing on the offensive side of the ball, better small things player and small things performer than he was last year. Whether it's rebounding, boxing out, setting screens, playing defense on the ball, playing defense off of the ball, like all of that waxed and waned depending on how he was doing on the offensive side of the ball. That cannot happen this year. And if it does, and the Lakers held on to him, rather than, sending him to Portland for Jeremy Grant, or rather than sending him to Washington or sending him to Brooklyn or sending him anywhere, if those bad habits continue to be a thing, then I don't particularly need to see him past the deadline. Because, again, as I've said all offseason, the Lakers have plenty of offensive firepower, especially if D'Lo is still on the roster. You have LeBron, you have AD, you have D'Lo, you have Austin. Two of those guys should be on the court at basically any time. And if they are, then, we'll see what Dalton Connect is able to do this year. We'll see what Max Christie is able to do, spacing the floor. We'll see what Gabe is able to do in a season where he isn't, hobbled. Offense is not where this team is really missing. And, that makes it, and especially, by the way, if you're trading for a Jeremy Grant, who is a high percentage, high volume 3-point shooter, if you're trading for Kuz, who is an upgrade in every way, every way that you can be on offense compared to Rui, if there are offensive upgrades to be had out there, and Rui continues to, and you have enough on the offensive side of the ball as is, if Rui continues to kind of wax and wane defensively, then he's just not a cornerstone player, or the cornerstone type player than the Lakers basically paid him to be. All that said, here's where I will, float some bail here for Rui. It is really, really difficult to do those small things for a coach doesn't like you. It is really difficult to put your body on the line and box out, or take a charge, or step into the right rotation, or lay completely out for a rebound, or set a good hard screen and take that physical abuse on your body when it kind of especially early in the year, it just doesn't matter. Taurean Prince is playing anyway. And that's where, I do think, so long as JJ, makes it known that he's in Rui's corner, that he's there, and he and his coaching staff are there to help develop this guy and make him a night in, night out, regular season and postseason performer. Those guys are the ones that get $30 million a year. And for Rui, like this is what's crazy. I don't know if you guys have ever, worked with or been on a team with somebody who is just insanely talented. Um, I was on a very good high school basketball team, and um, or even better, I helped coach another really you know good and talented basketball team. And we had this guy, I'm not going to say his name, um, but I remember like talking to him. And as it was, he was like still a very productive player. Don't get me wrong. But like I would watch him play, and he didn't want to play the position that was best for the team. And he didn't want to do the things that he needed to do, the small things that he needed to do that would really help the team. He basically just wanted to get by on his talent, and I think it wound up costing him opportunities at the next level after high school basketball. And if I were on a team with Rui and I saw that this guy has, like, I think he has at least, $25 million a year talent, maybe even more as the cap goes up. And if I'm on a team with Rui and I'm seeing like the effort that he doesn't give sometimes on some possessions defensively, and I know the amount of money that he's costing himself with that kind of approach, I don't give a rat's ass how much the coach doesn't seem to like you. I would be on him and be like, especially if I was a vet on the team. And that's where I think the Lakers were kind of lacking last year and have been lacking, are those like culture setting vets. But where the Lakers, or where if I were a vet and I saw Rui doing all of that stuff, I would be like, dude, do you understand what kind of insane wealth you're costing yourself with your approach to the sport right now? Do you understand like what we're talking about here? Where, okay, sure, you'll be fine. Like as it is, he's making 18 million bucks a year, I think almost 20 next year. Like he's still going to be doing just fine. But you know, the contract after this one could go from just fine in NBA player terms to holy shit type of, generational wealth, where nobody, so long as he's even remotely smart with his money, nobody who has even like a distant relation to Rui Hachimura, nobody will ever like be wanting financially. And and it's there for the taking if that's indeed something that he's willing to commit to. Those are the things that he's indeed willing to commit to. And it's right there. Like I fully believe that he's capable of those things. He's got the body for it. And then on the offensive side of the ball, in terms of like what I think the Lakers need to do to help him, I think far too often they basically use him as a safety valve. And we have some questions coming later that will address some like role specific things that we're talking about here. But if I were on the staff, I would get him in camp, and I would get him used to setting picks on the ball, setting picks off the ball, cutting. He's actually a very good cutter, decently good finisher if he has time to like catch, set his 2 feet and go up. Like he's a big strong dude, and there's a lot of havoc that you can wreak when you have that kind of those kinds of physical gifts. And if I were the Lakers, I would do more than Darvin did, and Darvin and his coaching staff did last year, to take advantage of those gifts more frequently than, far too many games were just like pass, 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 dribble, dribble, dribble. Oh, 7 seconds left. Get the ball to Rui, make something happen. And sometimes he did. Sometimes he didn't. But I just thought that like that's a part of his game that I think is very useful. But that can't be the thing that you get from Rui, because I just think he has a lot more to offer on both sides of the court, especially if his head is screwed on right. So, how likely is it that he lives up to those expectations? I don't even like setting numerical things. Like, I'd like to see him, I guess, average 16 points a game next year. I'd like to see him take 5 threes a game. I'd like to see him grab 6 rebounds a game next year. And then, more importantly, again, than those statistical numbers are what he does defensively. And, I honestly, I can't say one way or the other how likely it is that this guy focuses on the right things that make him more of a winning player than he was this season or last season. It all boils down to the coaching staff staying on him, his teammates also getting and staying on him, and then most importantly, by far, him holding himself accountable and understanding what a good defensive game looked like, what a good, little things type of game looked like, and getting angry at himself, and adjusting as quickly as possible when he doesn't have those kinds of games. Because again, this guy's he's a very, very talented offensive player. And, those guys, they have their role, right? But you ask any Denver Nuggets fan when the Nuggets look their most unbeatable, and it's when Michael Porter Jr. was making the shots that we all know that he is capable of making, but also not being taken advantage of on the defensive side of the ball. And, that's when, he completes, or he used to complete, that 5-man death lineup that Denver had. And when that lineup was clicking and MPJ was knocking down shots and he was playing even decent defense, they more often than not, they didn't lose. And for the Lakers, if Rui is going to be, in the role that I think the Lakers have kind of identified for him, it is going to have to start on the defensive side of the ball. And I think it's a coin flip. Like, I know it's a cop out for me to say that. I know that you guys are probably demanding some answer to hold me accountable for, but I truly, I think this is a coin flip. This is all. I wasn't thrilled by some of the defense that he played for Team Japan. Again, understanding how much of the offensive load he was carrying there, and that's going to impact the defensive side of stuff. But even then, he would just be standing there on the wing, guarding somebody off of the ball, and he'd wander away. And it's like, you need to be working on breaking those bad habits every single second that you're on a basketball court. And I don't necessarily always get the sense that that's his focus. And until that becomes his focus, I can't be as confident as I would like to be in that he's ever going to become that player. All right. I did ask Twitter for some questions. I'm going to check really quick about some of the questions that you guys have here from the from the live audience. Didn't see any super comments there, so I'm going to go in and answer some of the ones that I asked for specifically. So at LAL Prime, do you think he gets the starting spot or Vando back to the starters with the usual 4 others? I don't think that he, Vando, I haven't necessarily heard the best things about Jared Vanderbilt's camp so far in terms of his recovery, progress that he's made to grow as a basketball player. Like, I think it's a pretty good chance that Vando is the same old Vando next year. So, I think the Lakers probably on opening night go with their most talented group. Again, like what I've said basically is the starting lineup I would like to see on opening night probably isn't even their most talented group, but I would like to see Austin, Max, Rui, LeBron, and AD. And then I would have D'Lo and Vando together coming off of the bench. Vando making up for D'Lo's defensive issues. D'Lo making up for Vando's defensive issues in that second unit. Both of those guys, I think, would improve playing against second units. all that said, I think like the likeliest opening night starting group is D'Lo, Austin, Rui, LeBron, AD, and I think JJ just gets the most talent that he can get out onto the court. And I honestly, I get it. Like I get where JJ would be coming from. He's a rookie coach, and I think he is he's going to be trying to win over the locker room. And I think you play your safest bet there if you're JJ right at the start of the right at the start of the season. Because if you bring D'Lo off of the bench and you lose, your first like 3 out of your first 5, and now all of a sudden you got to make a lineup change and go back to D'Lo after potentially losing him by not starting him, like that's a risk that not many coaches would make, let alone rookie coaches would make. So I think it's most likely that the starting lineup is D'Lo, Max, Rui, LeBron, and AD. And they just lean heavily on offense, and they try to overwhelm teams, on offense with a coach who sees the game, from the offensive side of the floor. In a perfect world, I would go with Austin, Max, Rui, LeBron, AD. Me personally, I don't think that's how it'll play out, but that's how I personally would have liked to seen it go. Oop. Let's see. Ooh, this is a fun question. How could a JJ offense improve Rui's game, and where do you think he'll play in relation to Vando? Just talked about that second question here a second ago. It is very, very, very difficult. I'd even call it impossible to identify what JJ's offense is going to be, what JJ's system is going to be. And I know that there are other shows that have basically tried to do it through what JJ has said on his podcast and what he has said on broadcasts and stuff like that. But I have been reluctant to do that because a lot of times our own personal biases seep into that equation, and it winds up being like, well, this is how I would like to see him do it, so this is how I think he's going to do it. And I try to keep that out of it, just like the last segment, right? Here's how I would like to see it play out. Here's how I actually think it's going to play out. How I would like to see JJ's system benefit Rui is by having Rui just like Rui has. I don't know how many of you guys watching or listening have gone and seen a Lakers game that Rui plays in, but it is striking how big that dude is. You see him next to LeBron, you see him next to the other like elite athletic and big wings in the NBA, and you're like, whoa, that is a big human being. And for me, I would try to take advantage of that size and that physicality by having him set screens on the ball, off the ball, cutting to the basket with the intent to open up something on the backside, right? Collapsing the defense by way of a cut so that you open up a shooter on the backside of a set, like, those pin down screens as a player drives baseline. All of these things that, further involve Rui in a game beyond, hey, man, we weren't able to get anything. I know that you're in isolation against probably a really effing good defender. Can you go try to get a shot off and probably tank your field goal percentage? Thanks. Like anything beats that, right? Anything beats that, because like I can't stand, because you're asking somebody to basically have little to no rhythm compared to the other people on the court. You're asking somebody who's probably guarded by an elite defensive wing, and you're giving him only 7 seconds or so. Like, it's honestly kind of a miracle that Rui has the shooting stats that he had last year, given the way that he was utilized on offense. Like, it's kind of insane. Sometimes he's shooting threes, sometimes he isn't, sometimes he's a safety valve, sometimes he's more involved in the offense, sometimes he's fucking playing, sometimes he isn't. Like, it is like the season that Rui had, even while I said it kind of underwhelmed in some ways, especially in the postseason, was also a bit of a miracle. Again, super weird season that Rui just had. And I think, in order to get more out of Rui, it's going to take, him being involved off of the ball far more often than he was last season. So again, I don't know that JJ's system is going to be able to do that. I don't know what JJ's system is going to be. There's no way to know. There's no carryover from last year to this year, coaching wise. JJ has literally, I haven't gone out and tried to find the 5th grade basketball team to see if they were running 5 out, 4 out, 1 in, 5 game. I don't know. Like, I don't know if they were running the Princeton or if they were running the mob basketball that most 5th grade teams run. There is no way to know what kind of a system that JJ was running. However, for me personally, that's what I would do. This is what I would like to see. And I would like to see Rui still do some of the safety valve things. It would be really stupid to not still utilize the skill set that he has on the offensive side of the ball. It would be really dumb to be like, all right, that was fun, Rui, but you don't need to dribble anymore. I'm not saying that. What I would like to see, though, is that some of that still sprinkled in, but also before you even get to that, him doing more stuff that keeps him more involved throughout the game than he was last season. All right, we have, I think, one more question here before I look at the YouTube comments. My dude Rome asking, are we getting another henna tattoo Rui performance this season? Look, that was hilarious, him showing up with all of the henna stuff. But even better, to those of you who like watching, who like the show, but at times next year, we're probably going to do some playback here for the lounge. And I'll set up I think it's already set up, but I'll send you guys to playback to watch games with us, on playback. But last year when I was doing All Access Lakers, it was actually fun to do that show with Rome. And one of the funniest moments of the season was when I looked up and I was like, Rui get new tats? And the Lakers had, obviously they were playing in a game, and I think they had played either the night before or they had just recently played. It was all brand new. You could tell it was like fresh tattoos. And I was like, no, like are those henna tattoos? I'd never seen an NBA player rocking henna before, because, all of those guys can afford any amount of tattoos that they would like. And he wound up not keeping the tattoo there. So you could tell, I just pictured him at some kind of a county fair or walking down the Santa Monica Pier, or all throughout that whole area, looking and realizing while he's getting a henna tattoo, he's fuck, I have a game. Can this wash off? Can you wrap up? It's shoot around in 15 minutes. It was a really fun segment that we ran with on All Access Lakers. Unfortunately, I don't think I'm going to be able to do it this year. In part because of the situation with, I don't need to get into it, but no, that was really fun. I believe Rome is going to be focused on Coach's Den anyway, so I'll be popping into the Coach's Den this year, as well as doing lounge playbacks as well. We'll have all of that ready for you guys here at the beginning of the season. But that was a particularly funny moment. Rui showing up with henna tattoos on his on a game night. That was absolutely wild. All right, I am going to go ahead and call this one here, but not before I play this one more time. It is just too funny to not play it.
Hey, Dad? You want to have a catch?
What the fuck?
Have a great one, everybody. Please do hit that subscribe button. Please do hit that like button. And then on Thursday, I will be doing a show with Raj where we look at probably Jared Vanderbilt's season. And he wants to talk about Jalen Hood-Schifino. So I guess we'll talk about him as well. So until then, and until the next time you guys hear from me, I'm Anthony Irwin saying have a great rest of your day. Make somebody else's. And I will talk to you Thursday.